Welcome to another episode here on your Digital Makeover. My name is Jerry Colbert, and in today's episode, I want to be discussing with you all the issues that I found with the Rodecaster Duo and why you might want to think about whether or not it is worth purchasing this device for your needs. And it's all coming up next. In today's episode, I want to talk to you all about my experience so far with the Rodecaster Duo. Now, I don't really want this episode to come off as if I'm not pleased with the Rodecaster Duo because, well, that couldn't be further from the truth, to be honest with you. I really enjoy everything that is brought to my videos now. I love the audio processing, pretty much everything about the Rodecaster Duo. However, I did want to discuss some things that I found when I wound up purchasing the Rodecaster Duo. So, a couple weeks or so ago, I purchased a new Mac Mini M2 Pro, as well as the Rodecaster Duo. And though I thought this was a wise choice, after watching many YouTube videos, I came to the realization that there was something wrong. When I first hooked up the Rodecaster Duo and went through the setup procedure, it said that I did not need to update the firmware. Nope, I didn't need to do it at all. But after downloading and installing the Rode Central software onto my Mac Mini, the software said I needed to update the firmware. So, I tried to update the firmware, but it failed. Now, I did post a video not too long ago speaking about this, and if you haven't watched it yet, I'll leave a link up at the top somewhere up there. I don't know where, but I'll leave a link right there so you can click on and watch that video. And, I just don't really wish to rehash that video here, but suffice it to say, I was finally able to get the update to go through by utilizing the Rodecaster Duo itself without the Rode Central software. But the other problem that I had, which I still have today, is when I restart my Mac, upon restarting it, the Mac does not recognize the Rodecaster Duo and restarts with the Mac speakers selected for the sound. And when you take a look at the sound settings, Rodecaster Duo is not even there. Not only is it not there, but you can't select it to be there. So what I did was I had to unplug the USB-C from the Rodecaster that is hooked into the Mac and plug it back in for the Mac to detect it. Now, of course, this was the USB supplied by Rode. Now, I was also having an issue with the new Mac Mini I purchased and wound up returning it and getting a Mac Studio M2 Max. And the new Mac works like it should. However, the Rodecaster Duo was still having an issue with staying connected with the new Mac. So, I wound up purchasing another Rodecaster Duo to test and see if perhaps I had purchased a bad one to begin with. I mean, it's plausible. It could happen. However, the second Rodecaster Duo I purchased from Amazon did the exact same thing. So, I returned the second Rodecaster Duo and proceeded to do some testing. All the while, I was in constant contact with Rode tech support representative who insisted that there is no known problem between the Rodecaster Duo and M2 Max, which was basically my assumption, because it seemed that there was giving testing two Rodecaster Duos and two Macs with the M2 chips that made me think that maybe there was an issue with the, connection between a Rodecaster Duo and the M2 Max. It just seemed logical to me. So I went ahead and pulled out my MacBook Pro from 2019, I believe it is, and I tested the Rodecaster with it. Now the Rodecaster and the MacBook Pro worked just like it should. When I restarted the MacBook Pro, guess what? The Rodecaster worked, and it hooked right back up. The Mac was able to detect it. So what is the difference between the MacBook Pro 2019 model and the Mac Studio that I had just purchased? There's one glaring difference. And I'll go into some other differences in a little bit. But there was one glaring difference that stuck to me really obviously, was that the 2019 version of the MacBook Pro is an Intel-based computer, whereas the new Mac Studio is a what? An M2, a Apple Silicon chipset. However, even though I brought this to Rode's attention, they're pretty adamant that there's not any known issues with the Rodecaster Duo and the M2 Mac. So my question to them is what's the problem? Well, obviously you have a bad Rodecaster. Well, you can send it to us and we'll fix it. But then I brought to their attention, well, I purchased a second Rodecaster and it does the exact same thing. Which all they did was basically repeat the same mantra. There's not any known issues with the Rodecaster and the M2 Macs. So tech support really wasn't giving me any resolution, just basically stating the same thing over and over and over again, that there's not any known issues. And they suggested that maybe it's a Mac problem. Well, I, of course, let them know that I've tested it on 2 M2 Macs. And I tested it with my Intel 2019 Mac. And of course, they had to go back to the same mantra. There's not any known issues between the Rodecaster Duo and the M2 Macs. Which is, by the way, I just want to point out, in case anybody from Rode is listening, that's not very helpful. It's just really not. Why isn't it helpful? Because I don't have a resolution. But don't worry, there's a silver lining to this episode. So, given the fact that Rode was pretty adamant that there was no known issues and wasn't really giving me any ideas, what does that leave me with the alternative here? I don't have a fix for it. They're not giving me no ideas for a fix. So either I purchase 2 bad Macs and 2 bad Rodecaster Duos, or there is an issue with the Rodecaster Duo and the M2 Macs. Now, it might not be the chipset, as we'll come to find out later in this episode, but it does still have to do with the fact that I purchased an M2 Mac, and my Intel Mac has no problem. And, I'm a kind of guy that don't believe in coincidences. But, Rode still was not budging from their assumption that there is no problem, even though there was clearly a problem that I had discovered. Now, let me just preface this by saying, this might not be a problem for you. Maybe you have a Mac or M2 Mac or an M1 Mac. I'm not really sure if this is even... I'm thinking probably this is an issue with the Apple Silicon. So it probably does relate to the M1 Macs. But this might not be a problem for you if you never restart your Mac. But see, I was restarting my Mac because I was, updating it and stuff like that. And getting all my software back on it, since I had my old Mac was kind of, my old iMac was kind of not really useful for my needs anymore. So I had upgraded to this Mac Studio. And so I was updating, software. And so I was restarting it, and it was kind of getting annoying that I had to unplug the Rodecaster and plug it back in as far as the USB-C. So it's kind of getting annoying, But if you don't ever restart it, it's probably not going to be an issue unless you have an update. Then if you wonder why, well, why is it playing through the Mac speakers? This is why. You'll have to unplug the USB-C and plug it back in. However, I do have a workaround later on in this episode we'll talk about. So, anyways, like I say, I did do some more testing and finally came to the realization where the problem lies. Okay. And I explained this problem in a lengthy explanation in an email that I sent to Rode concerning this problem. However, they stopped responding to me. I'm not sure if they realized what the issue was or not, but Their correspondence ceased the minute I had explained to them what I had found, which, like I said, I don't believe in coincidences. They had been responding to me quite a few emails back and forth and this and that. Mainly their point was there's no issue with Rodecaster and M2 Macs. That was the common mantra that they would always preach in their response to me. But they did have some solutions that they tried, and some of them were repeat solutions that they had already told me in previous iterations. So I just find it awful curious that as soon as I spent literally a whole day, now this had been going on for 2 weeks and it was kind of frustrating, but I had to update the computer. I had different software I was trying to install. I was putting presets back in and this and that. So I was busy, So I finally decided to spend a whole day or two researching or trying to figure out and unplugging, plugging stuff in, doing this and that, and testing different cords and stuff like that. And I finally came to the realization, after trying, several USB cords, different ports on the Mac, I finally figured out that the issue is that the Rodecaster Duo has a problem hooking to a Mac M2, that's M2 Mac, that has Thunderbolt 4 ports. So let me rephrase that. So what I found was that the Rodecaster Duo has a USB-C cord that is supplied by Rode that plugs in the back of the Rodecaster in the USB-C port and plugs directly into the back of your MacBook. Well, actually not MacBook, but directly into the back of your Mac desktop, whether that's a Mac Mini or whether that is a Mac Studio, right? It'll plug right into the back into your Thunderbolt C port. What Thunderbolt C ports are on the back of a Mac? And at least a current M2 Mac. Thunderbolt 4, right? Current Mac Mini has Thunderbolt 4, which is a USB-C connection. And a Mac Studio has a Thunderbolt 4 USB-C connection. Now, when you hook that together, because that's the only way, because that's the cord that Rode gives you is a USB-C to USB-C. So the only way you can do it is to hook it into the back of the Mac. Now, the problem that I found is that if I took a USB-C and plugged it into the USB-A port on the back of the Mac, I didn't have the issue anymore. Nope. When I restarted my Mac and it restarted, it automatically detected the Rode, and I didn't have to unplug anything and plug it back in. Also, conversely, on the Mac Studio, there is a USB-C port on the front of the Mac Studio. Not the Mac Mini, but the Mac Studio. So if you take the USB-C that's plugged into the back of the Rode, the same USB-C that came with Rode's Rodecaster, and plug it into the front of the USB-C port on the front of your Mac Studio, it works as intended. When you restart your Mac, guess what? It doesn't have any issues. It detects the Rode just fine. So you might say, well, Jerry, isn't the USB-C on the front of the Mac Studio, isn't a Thunderbolt 4? Nuh-uh. It's a USB 3. And so is the A connection, the USB A on the back of the Mac Studio is a USB 3. Interesting, isn't it? Now, so what I come to realize is that if I plugged the Rodecaster using a USB-C to USB-A into the back of the Mac Studio, which is USB 3, which is USB-A, and I plug the USB-C to USB-C that Rode provides from the back of the Rodecaster to the front of the Mac Studio, Back then, everything was fine because the USB-C in the front of the Mac Studio and the USB-A on the back of the Mac Studio are both USB 3s. So, logically, unless, like I say, we can go back to that old mantra, you must have purchased 2 bad Macs and 2 bad Rodecasters, one of those two. So either that's true or this assumption is true. Now, you say, well, Jerry, on your 2019 MacBook, what is it? Is it a Thunderbolt 4? Well, no, actually it's not. It's a Thunderbolt 3 or USB 3 connection. And even though it's a USB-C, it's still a USB 3 connection. So, that's why I worked on my Intel Mac. Now, you're going to say, well, Jerry, see, they were right. There was no known connection between the M2 Macs. Yes, aha, that's true. In a way. But the M2 Macs are the ones that have the Thunderbolt 4 connection. So in a way, it does have something to do with the fact that it's M2 Mac. So it's more localized for the Thunderbolt 4 connection that the Rodecaster Duo much rather prefer the USB 3 connection. Now, I do not know if this is a Rodecaster issue or whether or not this is an Apple issue with the Thunderbolt 4 port not recognizing items that are restarted and reconnected like an audio interface. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. All I know is the facts are I purchased 2 Macs, M2 Macs, and 2 Rodecasters. And this is what I found was the issue. So, in summary, if you have a M2 Mac or even a M1 Mac, and you find that when you restart it, it starts with the Mac's sound settings instead of the Rodecaster's sound, and when you go up to sound settings, it's not, picking it up, not showing the Rodecaster. That's what you have to do. You have to unplug that USB-C. If you have it plugged into your Thunderbolt ports, you're going to have to unplug it. Now, like I say, I don't rightly recall if the M1 Macs have a Thunderbolt 4 or a Thunderbolt 3, so it might not even be a problem with the M1 Macs. They might only be Thunderbolt 3. I'm not sure. I haven't done any research in that part of department, so maybe some of you out there that have an M1 Mac, maybe you have a Thunderbolt 3 connection, it probably works just fine for you. But if you have a Thunderbolt 4 connection, and you're plugging your Rodecaster into that Thunderbolt 4, and you have that issue where when you restart it, it has that kind of a problem, then what you're going to do is you're going to have to purchase, which is what I did. I purchased a USB-C to USB-A because, it looks kind of stupid plugging my Rodecaster into the front of my Mac Studio. So I had to purchase a different cord. And so now I have no issues. The audio is still the same. I still don't have any problems with the audio. Everything works just fine. It's curious, though. I do remember reading somewhere on Rode that they suggest using the USB-C cord that comes with it because you could possibly have problems with the audio, but I haven't found any problems with the audio using a USB-C to USB-A. Now, I don't know if they mean just don't plug it into a hub or what have you, but I think as long as it's a USB-A 3, which are USB 3 connection, because there are USB 2 connections for the USB-A. I think as long as it's a 3, you should be fine. You won't have any audio issues. It's just an audio signal, and it should be fast enough. USB 3, I think, is 5 gigabytes a second. So I think it should be just fine. But if you find that you have an issue with the Rodecaster not being detected by your Mac upon restart, then that more than likely is the issue, and this is the kind of a workaround. Just get a USB-C, plug it into the USB-A, as long as it's a 3 in the back of it, which you should. If you have a Thunderbolt 4 M2 Mac, more than likely you have a USB 3 at the back of it, okay? So that's basically what I wanted to cover in this episode. I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please hit that like button right down below, right down there somewhere. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. And with that being said, I want to wish you all a wonderful week, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.